So the burnt chop syndrome, I love this. I heard it first from Lisa O'Neill, but I don't think it was actually her phrase. But the burnt chop syndrome, this is how it happens.
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello. My name is Ellie Dodds and I'm co-presenter, and today Joe's interviewing Tui Boyes. Karen was introduced to us by Jackie Handy of show number 173. Even better when we heard that Karen and Jackie randomly met on a plane and have been close friends ever since. Karen is a champion for lifelong learning across nations, industries and organisations, an expert in effective teaching and learning, study skills, motivation and positive thinking. Karen is a multi-award-winning international speaker. She is the wife of one and mother of four. Back to the studio.
Today I'm speaking to Karen Tui Boyes of Spectrum Education. Welcome, Karen. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So we start by you telling me who you are, what you do, and crucially, where you do it.
So I am a champion for lifelong learning. As an ex-teacher, I saw that children would come into the classroom at 5 years old with that light in their eyes, that excitement, but very soon, 2 years later, we were seeing the light die. And so I thought, why are we killing this love of learning? And so I wanted to know, how does the brain learn? How do we keep kids learning? How do we keep them engaged in learning? So as a teacher, I left teaching 26 years ago to run a company called Spectrum Education. And we work with teachers, parents and students now to really instill that love of learning for them.
And where do you do it?
Oh, well, globally, actually. So before the pandemic, I had travelled to 21 different countries to work with both teachers, students and parents. And now with the amazing ability with Zoom and everything else, I think I've had 36 countries this year so far.
Wow. And you are based where?
I'm based in New Zealand, so down to the bottom of the world in paradise.
Lovely. So, quite a long way from here. Yes. And at the other end of the day, we've had to do this interview at an unusual time for me. Because when I sent my usual times, I think it was like 3 o'clock in the morning for you or something, wasn't it?
Yes. Look, Joe, I would have got up at 3 o'clock for you, but it wouldn't have worried me. But I said if there is another time, that would be great. So it's 8 o'clock in the morning here, so I appreciate it.
Lovely. So let's talk a bit about how this all came about, because sort of now doing what you do, as you say, sort of internationally using technology, and I don't know, even in the sort of culture of now in terms of helping parents, teachers, children, it doesn't sound unusual, but you've said that was like 23 years ago when we had sort of less technology and were possibly less enlightened. How did it come about that you were able to start the business and start doing what you did in a time when it wasn't perhaps quite as well, and I might be making assumptions here, but a time when it wasn't quite as well received?
Yeah. So yes, it was 26 years ago, and I've been blessed my whole entire life to know that I was on this planet to teach. So it was a no-brainer for me to go straight from school to university to train to be a teacher and then to teach. But as I said, I saw that light in their eyes die, and I started to wonder, why is that happening? How do we extinguish the very thing we want, the love of learning? And at the same time, I actually went to a course about accelerating learning, and I was so inspired because I had never learned as a teacher how children learned. I didn't know how the brain worked. At the time, I had 36 six-year-olds in my classroom, and 27 of them were boys. And so if anyone's been a teacher, you know that boys have completely different needs to girls, and my 9 lovely girls just sat and did what they were told, and my 27 boys were a different story. And I didn't understand that boys and girls learn differently. And so, and that's a huge generalization, of course. However, I really wanted to make a difference, and I realized quite quickly that I could make a difference to the 36 children every year I had, or I could leave teaching to pursue a career in teaching teachers about what I'd learned. And yes, that was very unusual. And I remember ringing my parents because I was only 26 years old at the time too. So this is half my life ago. And so 26, I'm ringing my parents saying, I'm leaving teaching, I'm going to start a business. And my father's like, oh, but you've got a safe, secure job. Which I did. And it was scary. I didn't know how to run a business. I didn't know anything about business, but I knew it was the right thing to do. It wasn't about me. It was about trying to make that bigger difference and to be at the heart of teaching and learning for teachers to be able to make sure that they could do the very best that they could do, but they can't do it without the information. So I knew I could make a bigger difference outside the education system.
So it's interesting. I was talking to some of the members of my membership today about how when you're selling to, for example, corporate leaders or people within corporate situations, that you're not really selling to them, you're selling to the people who are going to pay for whatever that service is. And so sometimes the challenge is between sort of getting people excited at the level that you're going to help them at, but you have to go and get somebody else excited enough to pay the the bill, if you like. And it strikes me that must have been a similar sort of scenario, that you wanted to go and teach teachers, but teachers don't buy your services, presumably, or they maybe didn't to begin with. Tell us a bit about that whole process, because it must have changed over the 26 years as well. But you know, one of the
things that I did was I modeled successful people from outside the education industry. So I watched at the time Brad Sugars, who was a marketing expert, because I realized that I could have the best product in the world, but if I didn't know how to market it, as you say, if I didn't know how to get to the right people, if people didn't buy, then I was going to starve. So, and I wasn't going to make a difference. And so I started modeling what he was doing. He was starting a brand new company called Action International, and he started doing free seminars around New Zealand and Australia. And I went, well, I'll do that. So I just ran free seminars for teachers around New Zealand, and no one had ever done that before in the education field. So they were at 6 o'clock in the evening, so it wasn't during school time, and it was free. And you know, I had 300-400 teachers turn up, and some of the venues there was not enough chairs. They had to sit on the floor, and they willingly so did, and it was amazing. And so from that, I sold a bigger package, again, modeling what I saw in the corporate world happening. And so that was where I started, I guess, just being able to do that modeling. And now, 26 years later, I'm still doing that. I'm still looking at how are people getting a big reach? How are they making a bigger impact? And we just ran our first online summit a few weeks ago, and it was sensational. We had 7,500 people registered from 36 countries. So I just model. So that would be. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a really great sort of nugget for anybody who's got their own business, is look outside of your own experience and perhaps your own sector to see what everyone else is doing, and how can you sort of bring that into what you're doing. So no, really, really interesting to hear. And you sort of shocked me saying that you didn't get taught when you were going through your teacher training about how children learn. It just seems sort of quite logical that would be part of the training. But I wonder
Sorry, wouldn't you? I didn't think so, but no, what we got taught was content. We got taught how to teach reading, how to run reading groups. We were taught about the maths that we had to teach. We were taught about science. We were taught about music, how to run a PE session. But nowhere in my training, and still in many places around the world, teachers actually told about how the brain learns. How do we remember information? How do we retain? How do we set up an environment for learning to actually occur? Because they talk about teaching, and there is a difference between teaching and learning.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. It reminds me of a story my daughter sort of still shares. When she was in year 5, I think, her teacher explained the learning styles to the class and got them to do the questionnaire. It wasn't the Honey and Mumford one that I knew, but it was the one that came up with whether you were a visual learner, an auditory learner, or a kind of aesthetic learner. So they all did it, and I think they wrote it all up on the board, and then she literally came home at that sort of time and said, and he did all of that, and then he spent the rest of the year teaching us as he'd done all along. Not taking any account of the fact that they all had different learning styles, which was quite funny, because somewhere along the line he thought it was a good idea to explain the learning styles thing, but he got completely rumbled because she knew that he hadn't adapted at all.
And that's a symptom that often happens, is that teachers make the assumption if they teach children about their learning styles, then the children will know how to learn. But you actually have to teach to the styles as well and provide the opportunities. But that was also back 26 years ago. I remember a teacher, because I was young, pinning me against the wall and saying, it's not my responsibility to teach to the different learning styles. It's the children's responsibility to learn from me. Yeah. And so that was some of the mindset that was around back then, and still some today, that, the children have to learn from me. I'll just teach it and they have to learn. But we now know that, that's not quite the way the brain works, and we need to engage them in different ways.
Yes, yeah. And the point you made about your boys and girls, we were only talking about that at the dinner table the other day, having a daughter, my husband obviously being a man, and saying, how they learnt differently. And in our county in the UK, we have single sex schools. So Ellie's at a senior school that's just girls, and we were talking about why they've done that, and whether that's helpful or not or whatever. But as you say, just even if you sort of sweeping generalisation look at that difference, Simon was saying, exactly what you were implying earlier, which was that he wanted to run around doing stuff and wasn't going to sit around behaving and being told stuff and just learning it because he was supposed to, sort of thing. So
yeah, absolutely
interesting. So how much has it changed? So you said some places are still quite traditional. I guess some areas of the world are much different, and we're recording this just at the beginning of September, and very sadly heard last week that Sir Ken Robinson passed away, who has, I think, still the most watched TED Talk in the world, all about creativity and how we sort of drum it out of children in schools rather than enable it, sort of thing. So how has it changed in 26 years? Hopefully you're going to tell me it has.
No, it's just like cringing and going, I'm not sure it has. Often I feel such a failure, because it's like my mission is to impact and change and transform education, and then I look around and go, what impact have I actually had? But I'm sure I have. It is changing. It's very slow. Education is probably the slowest of all industries to change. And that's because it's fundamentally, and Sir Ken Robinson talked about this, it's fundamentally based on the wrong model, because the model is still based on, globally, on the English model of factory workers, that let's fail 50% of them, let's tell them they're dumb, tell them they're stupid, and they'll go work in the factories, which is the 18th century model from England. And so because that's in the 1800s, that's what the governments needed. And let's face it, education is a way of a government controlling a population. It starts with the haves and the have-nots, and there was a clear, let's fail 50% of the children. And so in 1907 in New Zealand, we took the same model. Let's fail 50% of them. Let's put them through a test at a certain age, and if they fail, then they're not academic. But of course, that test, which we still have, these tests and these exams for these children, are based on memory skills. But we don't teach children how to use their memories, how to retain information, how to regurgitate things in a stressful situation. And now maybe 3% of our population, might be a little more, but 3% of our population work in the factories. So the factory model has so gone, but our schools, even the way they're set out with moving from class to class to class, is still the factory model. So we're actually fundamentally working in a system that's flawed from the foundation up.
Yeah.
However, saying that, there's some autonomy that teachers have. So when teachers get that the system is broken, they can massage that system in a way. Yes. And so they can start doing things like, I wrote a book last year called Project Genius, and it's around project-based learning and how do we actually have children be able to know that they can make a difference, that they can have an impact on the world, and to find their passion. And so it's basically a 10-week program, maybe an hour and a half a week, that the children explore different things and try and make an impact in the world. So, for instance, one girl wanted to learn how to crochet. And we're like, great, well, so what? Anyone can learn to crochet. But then she realised there were orphanages in Romania who were freezing cold. So she started crocheting scarves for the Romanian orphans, and now she's learning crocheting, but she's got a bigger reason to do it. And so many teachers are taking that kind of approach, even the entrepreneurial approach of how to help kids understand business in the world. And for me, this is really important, Jo, because we know that 60% of the jobs in the future won't be there. Right. But the other statistic that most people haven't heard is that in the next 5 to 10, maybe 15 years, is that 40% of our 5-year-olds in our school are going to need to be self-employed to have any form of income. And we're seeing that during this pandemic. We're seeing jobs go. We're seeing whole industries being decimated. And the only way that people might have an opportunity to actually have an income is to create their own business. That's a whole different mindset, because school teaches you to turn up on time, do as you're told, don't rock the boat, don't question, and clock out at the end of the day. Yeah. You and I know being self-employed means that nobody checks that you turn up. If you don't turn up, you don't eat. You don't just do one job, you do all the jobs. You have to do the tax, you have to do the invoicing, you have to get the work, you have to do the marketing, then you have to actually do the work. And you have to be so multi-skilled, and you have to be self-motivated. So there is a shift towards that self-motivated, self-disciplined, self-efficacy for learners. So that's a long answer to your question. Yeah, no, and
both depressing and inspiring all at the same time.
Yeah.
But and also interesting, as you say, around the sort of pandemic thing that, you know, with the homeschooling and the disruption. And, you know, I've taken quite a sort of pragmatic view, but I know that's because I have had a business for 15 years and I haven't done the traditional route and everything else. So, you know, I've been saying very much, well, you know, it is what it is. Ellie will do what she does, you know, let's see what happens and whatever. But, you know, good example today, actually, she did her Duke of Edinburgh last year, which is a UK thing where you do sort of an outward bound mission.
Yes,
thing.
we have it here too.
You've got that too, yeah, cool. Of course, because it's Commonwealth, it probably does.
Yeah.
Of course. But they can't do the expedition, so they're going to have a certificate of achievement for this year instead of actually getting the bronze award because they couldn't do the actual camping bit of it. And today I said to her, you need to get your evidence collated from the people, where you volunteered and where you did your development sort of thing, to get that sent in. And she said to me, wow, my friend's mum's already emailed everybody and got all that info before the holidays, I think. So, and I was like, yeah. And she was like, so? And I was like, why would I do that? It's like, why would you get a certificate for doing something that I've then, had to gather together for you and provide the evidence for? You're 14. You're more than capable of asking the people that you worked with to give you a testimonial. Why would I do it? And she sort of stomped off, knowing that it was probably the right answer that I gave her, but not being happy about it because she wants me to do it for her.
That's one of the. The Duke of Edinburgh, I think, teaches students far more skills than sitting in a science class for a year.
Yeah.
Life skills that are going to help them in bigger terms.
Yeah.
And the other point you make is that parents that are enabling kids and doing so much for them. And I see children leaving schools who don't have any initiative. I see them coming into workplaces and just waiting to be told what to do.
Yes,
Even if they've done it 16 times, they come in and they wait for me to tell them what to do. And I'm like, well, shouldn't you just carry on what you did yesterday? But they've come from the system that's disempowered the kids and parents who are disempowering. And so things like the Duke of Edinburgh are wonderful for our children to gain those life skills in a school system that isn't quite up to speed to do that for them.
Yes, yeah, that's interesting. So how do you work with people? You've talked about working sort of internationally, and obviously there's so much more opportunity to do that at the moment with people expecting to have to work online. But what do your sort of days look like? What sort of activity is happening for you to do?
So I work in many different ways. So before this pandemic, of course, I travelled and I spoke at conferences as a keynote speaker, or I was a teacher in residence in a school. So I might base myself in a school for a week and work with the students doing model lessons so teachers can see some of the techniques and ideas happening in the classroom and how their children respond to them. Or I'm just coaching the teachers or doing mini workshops with teachers. I do parent workshops, and then in the secondary schools I would go in and teach study skills. So teach students how to pass exams, how to retain the information, how their memory works, all those learning to learn strategies. So a lot of that was face-to-face. For the past 6 years, though, I have been doing a lot of it online as well, as I've needed to stay home for my children. And so now that pivot or that transition to be able to do it as online hasn't been overwhelming for me. However, we are now doing things like producing, I said we had the summit. So the summit was amazing, and we're about to do another one for parents. And so we're doing a lot of things, but then I have several different streams of income coming into my business. So yes, I'm going out and doing the workshops, but we also have a magazine that goes out mainly to New Zealand and Australia in hard copy, but online for the rest of the world. So that's another way that we can make an impact and we can get the information out there. It's a beautiful magazine. I wish I could show it to you. It's 72 pages, glossy. It's a coffee table magazine, one of those ones you'd leave on your coffee table, and with pretty much zero advertising in it. So just great quality articles that are beautiful. And so we have products. I have a board game. We promote other speakers. So we do a lot of different things to be able to make the impact that we want. I have my own TV show now that came out of lockdown. So lots of different things.
So next obvious question, how do you fit it all in? It sounds hectic.
I can tell you my admin superstar has just walked into the office and she's practicing juggling right now, showing me the answer. Yes, so it is a juggle, and I'm quite frenetic and I just keep coming up with ideas. But, I think we prioritise well. I think I'm really good at time management, and I work 24/7. Not quite. I try and make sure I have time that I'm not working, but I also have an amazing team.
Yes, yeah. So you're also one of those weird people who gets up really early as well, aren't you? Tell us about that.
Well, that's part of my balance and my routine, yes. So I'm a member of Robin Sharma's 5 a.m. club. And I want to preface this by saying once you understand how the 5 a.m. club works, and once you get it into a routine in your body, which he says takes about 66 days, it doesn't have to be 5 a.m.
Okay.
But I did it for 5 a.m. for 66 days, as he suggests, and but until it became automatic, until it became a routine in my life. So how it works is, get up at 5 and you do 20 minutes of exercise, 20 minutes of anything that's to do with planning or meditation or affirmations or goal setting or something around, setting yourself up for success, and then 20 minutes of learning. So every single day I do that because when you get it to automaticity, it feels wrong if you don't. That feeling when you don't brush your teeth in the morning, it just feels wrong. It's like you're out of kilter all day. So yes, because I knew I was connecting with you at 8 o'clock this morning, I was up at 5 and I did my 5 a.m. club, and then I have that time to do what I want. But that in itself, I've been doing it for just over a year now, has totally transformed my life, has totally transformed my focus, and has totally increased my ability to get more done just by taking that hour just for me. No telephones, don't check my emails first, don't check my Facebook feeds or my social media feeds. It's just my hour by myself and focusing on my success.
Yeah. I love the fact that you say no telephones, unless all your friends are as mad as you. They're probably not up, are they?
No, but there's always emails in the inbox. And the problem if I look at my phone first is that we only have so much bandwidth in our brain. We only have so much capacity to hold on to information at any one time. And if I start looking at my phone first thing in the morning, that's taking some of my attention away. And so I don't want to use that bandwidth. So what I actually do is wait until afterwards. And yes, this morning I was waiting for something for my designer, one of my designers who's in Pakistan, and so he works overnight while I'm sleeping, but I'm like, I wonder if it's there, but I'm like, no, I have to focus on me first, and then I'll have a look. And yes, it was there when I finally got to it, but I knew once I clicked on his link and found it was there, my brain would have just gone and focused on that for the rest of the time.
Exactly. And of course, as you've said, working internationally like you do, your 5 o'clock is somebody else's sort of later in the day. So actually, I was being flippant, obviously, especially as I'm a night bird, so I don't even know what 5 a.m. is. But, because you work internationally, there's always somebody available who wants something or can talk to you, isn't there? It's so, it is that bit, as you say, is carving the time out. But one of the things that always jumps to my mind when I hear people talking about sort of very structured sort of routines, whenever in the day they are, is that whole piece about, firstly, how do you make sure you've got enough stuff, if you like, for learning and for, the sort of self-development piece, but also how do you make sure you stop? Because even things like using the Pomodoro technique and working with 25 minutes, I, want to keep going sometimes, and I think, well, that's not going to help, because then I'll have lost the structure of it, and that's part of the benefit of it, sort of thing. So
No, I don't. I think when you first start, you need that structure to get into the routine. But look, sometimes if I'm reading, I keep reading because I'm in an exciting part in the book, or I'm learning something that I haven't learned before, or I'm watching a TED talk, or well, no, they're under 20 minutes, but I'm watching a talk from one of my mentors, and the one I was watching this morning was 42 minutes long, and I didn't actually quite finish it, but it's so there's some flexibility around that. It's about doing. It's actually just about doing it. So, but of course, I also have to make sure I've got to have time for a shower. I need to be ready for Joe. I need to, so it's fitting it all in and making sure that you're disciplined around that.
Yeah. And do you have a way of sort of stacking stuff for that? Like you sort of said about, might watch a TED talk, or I might listen to one of my mentors or whatever. Do you have a way of sort of corralling that information so it's available to use?
Well, I have a mentor that I watch, and he sends 2 or 3 videos every week. So that takes up 2 or 3 mornings. I belong to a book club, so that takes up about 2 mornings to read a chapter of a book and dissect it. And then it's like I might be listening to an audio book, or I'm a lifelong learner, so there's always something to learn. I can never not be learning. No. So I've never had a problem finding things.
Yeah. So moving a bit more practically, what about sort of technology and tools and apps and things that you use to help you get stuff done? What sort of things do you use, do you recommend?
Well, actually, I'll go back to you talked about the Pomodoro technique. Yeah. I actually designed an app for students called the iStudy Alarm, which is free on all the platforms, and it times them for 20 minutes and then takes a 5-minute break. So I sometimes use that. If I know I've got a tight time frame and I can only be reading for 20 minutes, I'll use my iStudy Alarm. So, but I'm a little bit old school, Joe. I have a paper diary. My admin superstar, she has a electronic diary, yeah. and then she prints it out for me. I'm so old school. But I'm really big into systems. So writing systems so that other people can take over a lot of the work. So right now I'm about to run our second summit, and I've been writing systems of how do you put the photos in to the website? How do you set up this part of it? How do you set up a product? And so I'm setting up the systems, doing little videos and writing the system out, and then I can give it to my team and say, please can you do this, please can you do this. So I'm big on that, just systematizing things so then I don't have to do it.
Yeah. Or even sometimes, so when you do it next time, you remember how to do it.
Well, there's some truth about that too, yes. But my biggest learning is being able to let go. I am a control freak, so I need to be able to empower others, and I can do that by doing it myself first, writing the system, and then letting them run the system and then put their own flavour to it if that's appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I do something and I think, I must write that down so I remember how to do it next time, or I must, create some automation so I don't have to do this again next time. And then I go to do it and realise I did that last time. So I obviously do something and think, I must automate it, or I must, write down my process.
Especially when it's something you only do 4 times a year. Yeah, and we find that with the magazine. It comes out 4 times a year, and every time we're like, oh no, how did we do that last time?
Exactly. So what about looking after yourself, making sure you've got the energy to do all this? You told me you work 24/7, which is not true, obviously. But how do you keep that energy level going?
Well, I think the 5 a.m. club has definitely raised my energy levels, but I'm really clear on my priorities. It's me first. I have to look after me first, and so that's part of the 5 a.m. club, carving out that time for myself. I hear so many women talk about, particularly when you've got children, there's no time for yourself. It's like even if you wake up 15 minutes early and just have that time, there's something so special about that. Yeah. I am very disciplined with what I eat. So right down to weighing my food quite often to make sure I'm just getting exactly the right amount, and pre-preparing meals. So the meals are all prepared for the week, so that I don't, it takes me about 2 hours on a Sunday, and all my lunches are done. So I don't have to think. So that helps. So it's me first is my priority. My second priority is my husband and my relationship with him. So making sure that we keep communicating and keep the fire lit. And because I see so many couples, when their children leave home, look at each other and go, "Who are you?"
Yeah.
And so we carve out about every 6 weeks. We used to just have a date day, like in the diary. It's like, this is our day, we'll go to the movies or something. But since lockdown this year, we've actually having weekends away because our children are old enough for us to do that now. So it's like every 6 weeks we've booked an Airbnb somewhere and we just go for the weekend. Yeah. And even if we just read our books and don't even talk to each other, it doesn't matter. But it's just our time.
Yeah.
For us. And go for lovely walks or do whatever we need. So my third priority is my children, and they, of course, are important. So making sure I'm meeting their needs and doing what I need for them, and being the taxi mum, which happens regularly. And then the fourth priority is my business and making sure that I do that. So I'm really clear, and that's one of the things I do every single morning when I am doing my sort of mini meditation. I'm looking at, okay, what am I doing for me today? I sort of start, I'm trying to draw it and you can't see me. I sort of start like a spiral with me in the middle, and I spiral out and go, what am I doing for myself today? What am I doing for my husband today? What am I going, as the spiral gets bigger, what am I doing for my children today? What's happening in the office and the team today, and for my clients? So I sort of spiral out as I think about my day and what my priorities are. So that really helps.
So when I asked you about questions to ask you before we started, one of the ones you talked about was about what you've just said about the sort of your husband, your children, your work and so on.
Yeah.
And you talked about it, that many women are victims of the burnt chop syndrome.
Oh, yes. So the burnt chop syndrome, I love this. I heard it first from Lisa O'Neill, but I don't think it was actually her phrase. But the burnt chop syndrome, this is how it happens. You cook dinner and you've cooked all the chops and there's one burnt chop. And so who do you give the burnt chop to, Joe?
Wow.
Yourself. You go, all right, you go, oh, I can't be bothered with all the nonsense and the fighting. If there's a burnt chop, I'll just have it. Yeah. And it's like, and so we often leave our own needs till last, which, and we put ourselves on the back burner. And that's why I believe women burn out so fast, is we're trying to do so much and there's no self-care. Yeah. So what Lisa O'Neill, she has 4 children. She says when there's a burnt chop, she thinks, which child don't I like today? Yeah. And because there's always one, isn't there? So you go, I'm going to put the burnt chop on that child's plate, and I'm going to have the best chop because I cooked it. I did all the work. I deserve the best one. Yeah. So she puts the burnt chop on the child's plate she doesn't like. She doesn't tell anybody this, but when the child complains, she goes, oh, is it? And just brushes it aside, and she enjoys the chop that she's eaten. So it's like, yeah, I love that phrase. So how do we make sure we're not suffering the burnt chop syndrome?
Yes, absolutely. Because also, I mean, it's funny, I've said, I think, a number of times on this podcast, one of the reasons, in fact, the main reason pretty much that I started my business was so that I could stay at home when I had my daughter. And many times over the years, she's complained, that I'm never here for her. I do nothing for her, yes. Blah, blah, blah. And then I have to sort of remind her that, apart from the fact that I started the business because of her, I coached her netball team at school, and she's got to do X, Y, and Z. We, in the summer, apart from this year, obviously we normally go camping for weeks in Scotland because I can run my business from there, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. But none of that apparently ever lands. She doesn't remember or realise any of that. Apparently, I never do anything for her.
My children are exactly the same. universal.
I was probably throw in all the stuff about when you're trying to teach them to learn better or to have a better experience in their education. Probably just throw it all back in your face, just like all children do.
Oh, Joe, here's the truth. My children are the worst learners, and they don't know how to study. They don't know how to retain information, because what would their mother know?
Exactly.
It's like the plumber with the leaky taps, or the builder who has a half-finished house.
Yeah.
So I've just resigned the fact that I can't help. I can help many people, but just not the people I love most.
Exactly. Yeah, I take a strategy. My best friend lives opposite, and I take a strategy of getting her to deal with some of those issues, because my daughter respects her more than she does me.
Yeah. No, I always said to my son's best friend that I would teach him to drive, and his parents could teach his son to drive, because it's like, I think it would just be so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Lovely. So what about those days where it all goes horribly wrong? What do you do on those days?
Bubble baths are my go-to. So relax in a bubble bath and just let it go. I'm really good at understanding that sometimes you just need to let it go and come back to it. So I ask questions. I have mentors that I go to and talk things through. So I don't necessarily have a lot of days that are like that, but yeah, we also have dance parties in the office. So, on a really bad day, it's like, let's just dance it up. So put the music up loud and let's just dance. So that helps.
Lovely. So I was about to go to the last question and then realised I haven't asked you what you do to learn and improve. And you've obviously talked about you learn every day and all that sort of stuff, and you're an expert in learning. I might have taken away almost an opportunity to share resources and ideas, but luckily I remembered. So any tips and thoughts for people in terms of learning and improving yourself?
So the whole learning thing is, you need a purpose to learn. You need a reason to learn information. And of course, that's part of the challenge in schools. Kids are just told they have to learn it with no reason. So having a purpose to learn it makes it easier. And then breaking it down into small, manageable chunks is, of course, another one, which is why we've created the iStudy Alarm. And by the way, your listeners can download that, and there are 27 study tips embedded within that, and 12 exam tips. So they're right there. They'll be right at their fingertips. Understanding the learning process for me is the most important. That we have three parts of the learning process really quickly. We have the input, we have the output, and then we have what's called relearn. So you input information, and that's what people are doing right now listening to this podcast. You're inputting information into your brain. Then output is how much can you remember? What did you retain? What can you tell someone about what the conversation Joe and I've had? And there'll be a gap between the input and the output. Unless you have a photographic memory, you're not going to remember everything that we have talked about. Yeah. So when you find that gap, that's where the learning happens. You have to relearn. So that's when you use repetition, or that's when you talk about it with someone, or ask questions, or do research on the internet to find out more. And so then you input more, and then you check your output. How much do you understand? How much can you do? And then if there's a gap, you relearn. So this is a cycle that goes around and around and around. And many of our students, particularly in our secondary schools, and I bet your daughter is a victim to this too, when she's been told to go home and study or go home and learn that, she goes over what she already knows rather than what she doesn't know. Yeah. Because it feels good to go over what you know. Oh, I'm clever. Gosh, I'm smart. I've got this. But when we start going over the things we don't know, the internal voice changes to, oh, this is hard. What if they find out I'm not as smart as they think I am? The imposter syndrome. What if I fail? And they don't want to let their parents or anybody else down. So learning is hard and it's difficult, and the internal voice is not necessarily positive when we're learning. But we've been sold the lie that learning is fun. go to school. Learning will be fun. It's not always fun. Learning can be really hard.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And for me, it's that thing about having sort of deadlines and visible outcomes. So, what really works for Ellie is people seeing stuff. Her having to hand something in, or turn up at something, or produce something.
Yeah.
And some of the teachers did a really good job of it in lockdown, and some didn't. And I know she will have only done the things that anyone's noticed. And so, those teachers,
Human nature.
yeah, exactly. And those teachers who are good at noticing, she'll have done well in, and the ones that don't, she might have still seemed to have done well in, but she probably hasn't. They just don't know.
And the other thing is, when you say do well in, if you asked her, how did you get that great mark for that? She probably doesn't know.
No.
She'll just go, I don't know, I just did it. And so therefore they can't repeat their success, which is a real concern for me, because they need to know, well, I did this and this and this, and that caused the mark that I got. But most of them don't know.
No, exactly. So the last question then, what about those days when you get to live more? And that's where I talk about getting to do more of the things that you want to do and less of the stuff that you don't want to do. What do those days look like for you?
Oh, I'm such a geek and a nerd. I'm at work. I am so passionate about what I do. I seriously could do this 24/7. Doing a podcast like this, being on a TV show, being in front of the room, working with teachers, parents, and students, it just fuels me. Some days, if I'm in a school live, I will do a staff meeting, a teacher meeting before school. I'll work with the students all day. After school, I might do another teacher meeting, and then in the evening, I'll do a parent meeting. And so they're good 12-hour days. And people come up to me afterwards and go, particularly the client who's employed me, and say, aren't you exhausted? And I'm like, no, I am so energized after those days because I'm in my passion, I'm in my flow. But if I'm not doing that, I might be in my craft room doing crafty things. I might be out in the garden. I love to have a beautiful garden. And so we've about beginning of spring when we're recording this. So, I'm about to be able to get out into my garden. So, but then of course, being with my family and my husband is priority.
Yes. Yeah. Lovely. Thank you, Karen. It's been great interviewing you today. Tell people how they can find out more about you and get in touch.
Go to spectrumeducation.com.
I think that's the most succinct anyone has ever been. And that's what I do when I go on other people's podcasts. It's just like one website is easy.
From there you can find everything else. Yes, I've got 6 or 7 Facebook pages. I've got a TV show, but it's all on that website. So spectrumeducation.com.
Lovely. I was expecting a shopping list. I'm pleased it was a very short one.
No shopping list.
Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Jo.
All this information is available in the show notes. If you go to powertolivemore.com / in this case 179, then you'll find them there. And this week I just want to talk to you about personal development. It was something that we were talking about at Counterpoint Networking this week, and we were talking about the different ways that each of us ensure that we keep developing ourselves and learning. And so we talked about things like listening to TED Talks. I was saying that you can watch them on YouTube. There are newsletters that you can sign up for on their website, and you can pick, I think if I remember rightly, topics, and then they'll send you the sort of top videos relating to those topics. I also recommended on the podcasts you can get TED Radio Hour, and that's where they take a theme and then they take some of the presentations that have happened and they go and do further interviews with those people, and then they sort of stitch it all together so you get an hour around a particular topic, including some of those presentations at TED, but also some individual interviews as well. So that can be really helpful. Other people talked about programs that they've invested in and actually bothered to study. We were also laughing a bit about the whole concept of shelf learning, as it used to be called in the real world. Not sure what buying digital products that you don't actually follow is called, but that's sort of equivalent. So making sure that if you are going to invest in something, that you do put aside that time to do something with it. We talked about mentoring and masterminding, and we were actually talking about counterpoint networking and whether we'll continue with our topics that we've been doing up to now, which have been really helpful for me in terms of my podcast outros. But we're also thinking that we might, moving forwards from November, hold sort of a masterminding type opportunity at the end of the networking, so people can bring their business issues, whatever they may be, and the other people that are there can help with that. And so we won't have a topic per se, but we'll just discuss whatever people bring to the meeting. So that may well be what we do. And so hopefully I'll get some nice juicy topics that I can share on here as well. Other people talked about listening to podcasts and audiobooks, and it's certainly something that I do quite a lot of. And as you know, I have my own podcast. I'll tell you why you know that, because you're listening to it. So we were talking about that. So you're one step ahead of the crowd as you listen to this podcast already, but also some of the other ones that are out there that you can listen to. I mean, there are so many, and I just hear of people starting new podcasts every week at the moment. We also talked about reading and how there are so many great business books out there. Some people like to listen to them rather than reading them. And there's something called Blinkist that I have used in the past, which is a website that summarises business books into blinks, as they call them. So sort of sections that are much quicker to read than a book. And you can use them to really get the key points from the book rather than having to read it. But also sometimes you can read the key points and then get so absorbed into that you want to actually read the whole book. So it doesn't sort of stop you reading the book. It can enhance that as well. And my husband mentioned a app that he's downloaded recently, which is doing a similar thing, which I'm just looking up to tell you. It's called Headway, and that's the same sort of idea, that it's summaries of business books that you can read. And I think there's some sort of daily suggestion for you and all that sort of thing too. And of course the other thing is just really having those opportunities to meet with people. So the networking that we do on a weekly basis is sort of about meeting new people if we get new people come to it, but actually it's much more about meeting people that we know and are developing a relationship with, and also then can trust to help us and give thoughts on our business challenges as well. So all sorts of ways of personal development, and that was a really interesting conversation that we had. So I made a note a couple of weeks ago. I keep meaning to remind you that I have a Facebook group, which is Using Your Power to Live More. So if you go to facebook.com/groups and then /Using Your Power to Live More, you can join there, and I share useful content. And at the moment I've got lots of content going in there about my 30 days of inspiration in October, which is all about living your best life now. If you're interested in signing up for that, if you haven't already, then go to powertolivemore.com /living your best life now, and you'll get added to the list, and then you'll be able to see on the emails that you get links to all the previous posts that you might have missed for the first bit of October. If it's not October anymore, you can still go there and sign up, and it'll start sending you those messages on a daily basis for the next 30 days, so you can get your 30 days of inspiration whenever it is that you're listening to this. As ever, the show notes are at powertolivemore.com /179, and we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Use your power to live more.